Hi everyone. Welcome to our first keynote of our Secure Our Streets conference. My name is Sergey Weber. I'm a cybersecurity instructor at UL Solutions and a ASRG chapter lead in Berlin. I will be one of your hosts today. So we're kicking off things with the topic that lies at the very heart of today's challenges and opportunities in our industry. Of course, it's product cybersecurity. As vehicles become more software-driven and connected, the alignment of regulation standards, industry practices is shaping not only how we design our vehicles, but also how we do business across the entire value chain. To lead us through this critical discussion, we joined by Mathias Dehm, Chief Product Security and Privacy Officer at AUMOVIO, previously known as Continental. Mathias brings over 14 years of experience across cybersecurity and privacy, spanning sectors from defense, telecommunication, and automotive. And with both a strong technical background, a strategic perspective, he has built a remarkable career at the intersection of technology, the regulation, and business needs. Please join me in welcoming Mathias Dehm to the stage for his keynote, Product Cybersecurity in Practice, Aligning Standards, Contracts, and Industry Needs. Mathias, the stage is yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Sergey, for that really kind introduction. It's for me an honor to be here, the keynote speakers of the today SOS. I mean, SOS is a remarkable conference, bringing so many experts and expertise together for knowledge sharing, and that free for that community. So also kudos to everyone involved in that organization. And as I said, it's an honor for me to be your keynote speaker for this session 2025 today. My topic will be around product cybersecurity and practices, aligning standards, contracts, and industry needs. Before I start, and Sergey already introduced me briefly, but let me give the chance to say it in my own words. Yes, so I have multiple experiences in different industry, coming from logistics, telecommunication, medical, defense, and automotive, as well as I worked in an IT startup. I'm in Continental since 2014. Directly started in the field of automotive cybersecurity and privacy. And in that presentation, I would like to share with you a little bit my background, what I have learned throughout this many years in that industry for automotive cybersecurity, when more or less the topic really kicked off at that point in time. Also, I was 2 years assistant of our CEO to connect not just the technical side and the nerdy cybersecurity side, but also more or less the business side. My current role is being the Chief Product Security and Privacy Officer. It has been extended also with a focus on product safety and product AI governance, because there are always interconnection between all of those. Now you might ask yourself, what the heck is AUMOVIO? So today also marks a special day for us. I think most of you know Continental. Continental, with on the one hand side, with the tires business, we have also kind of other businesses for the industry with ContiTech, which is related to rubber. And we always had the automotive part, developing different kinds of components for the automotive industry, brakes, instrument clusters, display solutions, radar sensors, cameras, connected solutions, and so on and so forth. And by today, actually just 35 minutes ago, we ring the bell on the stock market. We are now, by today, listed on the stock market as our own independent company. So Continental just decided to make an independent brand and company out of it. With roughly 86,000 employees and more than 100 locations in 25 countries. Our annual business sales is around 20 billion euros, architecture and solution, safety, motion, and user experience. I wanted to take that opportunity to introduce you just a new brand, that you are not surprised. And maybe when you are listening today to some stock market news, I think you will hear that name more frequently now. Before I start with the real content, a short disclaimer. I will show some statistical information about contracts, and I know be really careful when it comes to antitrust topics. So please note that's the info to any specific customer. Typically, if you say, this requirement sounds something which is coming from us, yeah, typically this is, sorry, somehow the slide is switching. Those are typically also from many other customers coming. And the slides and information are shown on general purposes only. All right. That's sufficient. Now let's start and digging into the topic itself. Before we start, let me still explain in which kind of transformation we are in. Previously, we have typically the patchwork architecture, up to 100 different ECUs, limited computational power. Each ECU had a dedicated function and responsibility, and according to this, the ECU has been developed. The focus was more on pleasure, safety, and comfort. Now we are already moved in the direction of a function-defined architecture, where we have only few performance computers and zone controllers. We have more and sufficient computational power and also reducing wires. And we are always connected. So more or less the vehicle is getting one part of a smart IoT device. And we see here different direction also from different OEMs. I would say some Chinese OEMs are more aggressive and progressing and moving in the direction of a function-defined architecture. I see also the German OEMs catching up, and there are also some other OEMs with a long heritage, which rather stay on sequential evolving the legacy architecture. Let's say it that way. So each OEM has also a slightly different architecture, but the trend is clear and remains that everyone is moving into a function-defined architecture or a software-defined vehicle. With that, also how we think the business will change. Before it was typically like that. You have developed the components, you have developed the vehicle, software has been integrated, then SOP started. Sometimes you have still done some maintenance on the middleware, maybe until end of production, but quite often you stopped earlier and only reacted on safety critical issues or something like that. And then you went after EOP until end of lifetime into the spare part business. With the decoupling of software and hardware, it gives us on the one hand side also new opportunities, as well as a general shift and regulational demand to think along the whole product lifetime of the vehicle. That means we will have continuous updates on the middleware for security and safety reasons. Also functionality, what the customers are more and more demanding, and also until end of production, the maintenance phase will remain. What does it impact? What is the impact for our industry with respect to this? Is that also the business model is changing. With selling a car with a one-piece price, as it was traditionally, we are now need to see how can we more or less get a return of invest for new functions for the whole maintenance of those products, what you might not be able to allocate to the piece price at that point in time. And this is, I think, for the whole industry quite challenging, because we are talking up to 15 to 20 years when you look the start of production. All right, so as you can see, we are shifting into new technology, and the new technology on the one hand side provides us opportunities, but also challenges. What we see here is the latest report on automotive cybersecurity attacks. And we see that the portion of incidents with a high or massive impact, meanwhile, is increased to 60% of all incidents. So it means automotive is getting more and more a target for hackers. And the trend is continuously growing. Around 41% of all the vulnerabilities in automotive are critical. And each year, roughly by 1%, the number of black hat hackers is increasing, while the number of white hat hackers is decreasing. So that means there is more and more kind of business opportunity perceived attacking the automotive industry. And we see that the most targeted attacks are telematic and application servers, which also links then to 92% of all attacks were remote in 2024. Next part is APIs, infotainment system, ECUs like telematics units and gateways, as well as then infrastructure comes into account with EV charging stations, for instance. So also here, the trend is more and more shifting. And seeing those numbers before, many of us are intrinsic motivated, right, to protect the passengers and the vehicles against those attacks. So we want to be the superhero, yeah, to do it. Somehow, in the reality, looks like that. Or I can say it from my perspective for sure, that I have to deal with many laws, with rules, regulations, and standards. I have to be in the negotiation of contracts with car manufacturers. I have to fight with legal on the right wording in side letters or disclaimers. I need to create tons of different work products in my daily life. Whereas that, what is actually the added value? Do we actually increase with that the cybersecurity of a product or not? Yeah, what do we do? So throughout this presentation, I would like to emphasize maybe a way out of that situation, and we can only do it together as a whole industry to come back to a situation where we are all being superheroes again. Before we go into those details, let me explain what are typically drivers for us, yeah, in our area. First of all, we have the technological need, yeah, like cryptographical algorithm, intrusion detection systems, authentication methods, and so on and so forth. We have external demands coming from regulations, customer contracts, customer expectations as well. And a company, like when it's getting also a large company, has own self-commitments, what they maybe use as marketing purposes, also their own policies, rules, and other technical compliance topics. Those areas are the three more or less we see as a main driver in our industry. And what is the goal of a big, large company in the automotive industry is to have a compliant product on the market. That's the same target also for a car manufacturer. Compliance is a huge important part. Otherwise, you lose your business more or less. And we need to understand that there are in the world roughly 7 million legal documents. And just alone in Germany, it's estimated to be roughly 150,000 individual regulations which are currently in force. I mean, that's insane. Yeah. And somehow you need to still screen that, understand, is this applicable for me? Is it not applicable for me? And there are many regulations which are quite horizontal, which makes it quite complex. I think in general, we can put all those regulation into the following 5 areas. Yeah, we have for sure product safety, which is a really essential reason why we do also cybersecurity in order to protect also the safety. One of those assets, not the main reason for cybersecurity, but one of the biggest one, I would say. We have product conformity. Yeah, it's about homologation and certification procedures. Also to match to match actual product properties. We have environmental compliance with emission consumption, resource efficiency, materials, circular economy. IP plays an important part about patents, trademark licenses, and copyrights. And yes, that's also important for the cybersecurity. Luckily, many standards when we come to cryptographic algorithms can be used free of charge, but because they are really a kind of standards, but there are more, you need to check that, yeah. If for new cryptographical algorithm, there are patents on it and you need to pay license fees. And last but not least, for sure, cybersecurity as well as a cluster. Then you split those regulation and areas typically in technical regulation, standards, internal rules, contractual agreements, and your self-commitments. And afterwards, those ones you can categorize in process-related requirements, or product related So, all right, on the European side, we have the Radio Equipment Directive. We somehow got disconnected, Sergey.
Yes, you got disconnected, Matthias. That happens.
Sorry.
And no worries, no worries. That's why we have a little bit of layway to maneuver. We
Okay.
have enough time. Okay, so please get your machine up and running. And once
Yeah,
again,
it's sorry. I don't know why. I need to just enable the camera. Just
yeah,
reloaded the website, but Wi-Fi and everything was stable. Sorry.
no worries. So let's wait a minute to get up things up and running. You see, people are loving you still.
Still, yes.
Look at this.
I need to share. Sorry.
Yes, you need to share.
Okay.
So maybe you can go one slide back and then restart
One
from there.
slide back again.
Yeah, maybe start
All
from here and
right.
then go further. Whatever is
Okay.
the summary here. Thanks, Matthias.
Okay. Good. So sorry, everyone. Somehow connection got interrupted while actually my Wi-Fi was stable. So I don't know why, but sorry about that. But still, I think let me very briefly still conclude that slide. As I said, in order to have a compliant product, you need to consider the different areas here from product safety, intellectual property, product conformity, product environmental compliance, and product safety and cybersecurity and privacy. This is how we do it in our company. We have split it around the different areas of technical requirements or technical regulations, sorry, standards, internal rules, contractual agreements, and our self-commitment. And in order to understand then what are the gaps, you need to put it in buckets, which are process-related requirements, which are product-related requirements. And when we come to the regulation landscape, we see here more or less everything what is red is the maturity of those countries underneath the UN ECE R.155 regulation, which we, I think, all know. What is now quite new upcoming, it's already in place, the radio equipment directives. We have the European Cyber Resilience Act, which will be enforced, and we have a product liability directive. And those are kind of horizontal regulations which still affecting us in the automotive industry. Particularly the product liability directive is now mentioning in the first time that about cybersecurity vulnerabilities, yeah, and how to deal with that. What we see in other countries, we have in India AES 189 for the automotive industry, which will be enforced in October 2027. We have in China with the National Vehicle Type Approval Regulation as well something in place, which is close to UN ECE for new vehicle types starting January 2026 and all vehicle types January 2028. I will go a little bit deeper in those regulations on the next slides. But we also see, particularly now in the US, with the new law on securing the information and communication technology and services supply chain, so long title for law, that cybersecurity is been used for protectionism. So more or less, the law is saying or allows to block certain transaction involving information and communication technology and services, which include hardware, software, and services, which involve foreign adversaries and might present a risk to the national security, critical infrastructure, or the safety of US persons. At the end of the day, more or less, it gives the opportunity to block software or connected solutions coming from countries such as China, North Korea, and Russia. And we see this also that the discussion on European level is moving in a similar direction. How it will end up, we need to see. But cybersecurity is one major reason of protectionism. Now, looking into the differentiation of the different standards, as we said, we have the UN ECE, we have the ISO standard, and now the China standard comes into place. To summarize, UN ECE is focusing on the vehicle type M, N, O, and L. So M are passenger vehicles, N are goods vehicles, O are trailers, L is coming up for UN ECE is for 2 and 3 wheelers. So what is not included, for instance, is agriculture vehicles, so which are category T, R, and S. In China, it's covering also M, N, and O, so quite similar as we've seen it on the UN ECE level. It's demanding a cybersecurity management system with vehicle type approval, technical requirements, and dedicated testing methods. Then for sure, we have the different standards. ISO SAE 21434, I think everyone is aware of that. China is translating this standard into a Chinese standard, which is called GB/T. This is at the moment still in a draft version. So what are now the differences? We see similar requirements in China, but higher expectation. Higher expectation when it comes to vulnerability management, also more concrete methods and examples when it comes to security testing. So at the end of the day, the China regulation is a little bit more stricter than the UN ECE regulation. Also, a big difference is that the China version is focusing purely on the vehicle, while the UN ECE regulation is also considering the backend part of the connection. When it comes to the voluntary standards, both are guidance how a cybersecurity management system can be implemented. And sorry, somehow it's switching automatically. And the China GPT provides more examples, especially when it comes to Tara for gateways. So that are at the moment the most difference. A release date of that China standard GPT is not known to me yet. So we need to see when this will be then officially being released. On the next slides is, let's look to India, AES 189. More or less, it mimics also the UN ECE regulation and the ISO standard. It's targeting the OEM and also giving the requirement to manage the supply chain risk, similar as we see it in the UN ECE regulation. Also focus here is vehicle type M, N, and T. So as T is, as I said, agricultural vehicles, and L7. So L7 is a kind of a quad four-wheeler, which is limited to 80 kilometers per hour. So this is then kind of unique in India. We have a full enforcement in October 2027. It's requiring cybersecurity type approval for vehicles, and they have the similar regulation as we have it on UN ECE R.155 with the regulation in India AES 190. One positive part of all those regulations in China and in India is that they are quite similar to UN ECE, and that is already a big achievement for all of us. Looking now in Europe, and it's not just Europe, but also linked to all the international standards, we see, a quite broad picture. You have here on the one hand side the UN ECE regulation, and the UN ECE regulation needs to be implemented in the European law, or is implemented in the European law by the European General Safety Regulation. Additionally, you have the Cyber Resilience Act as a kind of horizontal regulation. The European government wanted to enforce the cybersecurity across all industries. That was more or less the target of it. Somehow, luckily, we were able, or the industry were able, that vehicles which are already regulated by the general safety regulation are excluded by the Cyber Resilience Act. Otherwise, you would need to follow, multiple regulations with the same purpose behind that. At the moment, we still have the Radio Equipment Directive. It's applicable, for radio devices like telematics units, control access systems, for instance, in the automotive industry, and so on. They are requiring, or they need to fulfill dedicated cybersecurity requirements, and at the end of the day, need to have a CE label on top of it. This will be then planned to repeal and replace by the Cyber Resilience Act, which is already a good step forward, more or less. Looking now on the standard side, the UN ECE regulation is in place. A reference implementation for a cybersecurity management system, which is demanded by the UN ECE, is ISO SAE 21434, an international standard. The guidance how to audit such a cybersecurity management system is described in ISO PAS 5112. Contribution is coming then also from ASPICE for cybersecurity, for instance, and so on. Also, we see regulation when it comes to Euro 7, so about emission of the vehicles. There is also discussion on cybersecurity ongoing. And we see a lot of horizontal regulation. With the Cyber Solidarity Act, the Product Liability Directive, which is in Germany called the Produkthaftungsgesetz, machinery regulation, and the NIS 2.0, at the moment mostly targeting the enterprise IT security environment. So you see that this whole setup is already extremely complex, and to understand this requires a lot of know-how and expertise. Positive sides, European regulation also understood that somehow they need to better streamline all those different regulation when it comes to digital legislation. They have established the digital omnibus. Targeted is to harmonize the landscape to regain competitiveness. They will look on the Data Act, AI Act, Cyber Resilience Act, on the Digital Service Act, Digital Market Act, GDPR, and so on. So just by naming all those different regulations, you see the complexity behind that. And I think it's a positive trend that the European Union is now taking this seriously and looking how to streamline all those regulations. And the Cyber Resilience Act will be the center of those activities. All right, now coming a little bit more into our cybersecurity topic and a little bit the history, how this topic has been evolved. In the 19th, there was the start of the electronic immobilizer. That was indeed a shift, more or less, from security and electronic or digital security has entered the vehicle. In 2010, the whole topic about car-to-car communication and standards has been evolved. And there was a discussion about public key infrastructure. The discussion around how can we actually send safety critical information from cars to cars, and how can we trust the authenticity and integrity of that information. And then the idea of public key infrastructure came into account. Now, at that point in time, also OEMs started to develop their own public key infrastructure for the vehicle. We have then a big item here in 2015 with the Jeep Cherokee hack from Miller and Walasek. I think everyone is aware of that, which still also changed due to the high media attention, the perspective of cybersecurity in the automotive area. After that, we saw many activities on the regulation side. We have here with the NHTSA, the US Transportation Authorities, cybersecurity best practices, which has been released. Also, many discussions on the parliament in US has started on regulating automotive cybersecurity. But as we've seen, we have more regulation everywhere else except in US when it comes to cybersecurity for vehicles. Yeah, meanwhile, so somehow it has been stopped the discussion. While on UN ECE level, we made progress. We have the international standard with ISO SAE 21434, which is then also for sure applicable in the US. And then the enforcement of the UN ECE regulation, and now in the future also for China and India. Let us look how the requirements in the industry has been changed along that timeline from my own experiences. Well, we had in the beginning mostly technical product related requirements. Yeah. For instance, on the immobilizer, how to protect it and how to make it more secure, where to store the keys in the ECUs, and so on. It moves on with more general cybersecurity best practices, what has been pushed down by the OEMs to the suppliers, while there was not a real standard. So also my company, we worked quite early, beginning of 2014, 2015, on the idea of an TARA and how a TARA could look like without having a standard, just by the best practices from other industry like IT security. As soon as the standards has been established, the regulation came into force already actually before the official releases of all those documents. Our customers, the OEMs, requested to be ISO SAE compliant. And they had on top many individual requirements as well. And this is what we still see. The documents are not just saying be compliant to ISO SAE 21434, but on top, they have many, many other requirements which are customer specific, and also asking to pass that down along the supply chain. We have long-term maintenance requirements, as well as covering now multiple regulations, depending on the dedicated markets. And as I said, more and more OEM individual requirements. How is now such a landscape of contracts looks like? So typically you have general terms. General terms are defined between, from my perspective, from my view as a tier one, yeah, between the car manufacturer and the supplier. They are applicable for the whole company. Then you have engineering statements of work, which are closer to what is actually expected from the deliverable of the product. Additionally, you have cybersecurity agreements. Sometimes it focuses on the products. Sometimes it's a combination of requirements for cybersecurity on the product, on digital services, as well as IT. Then you have a CIA, which you are typically aligned on a project level, which is a cybersecurity interface agreement, which also clarifies the responsibilities between you as a supplier as well as a customer. And then you have audits and assurance documents, which all sometimes is adding also further aspects and further requirements, yeah, with cybersecurity checklists, assurance documents, audits, questionnaires, capability assessments, and so on. What I have now perceived over the many years, I look into all of those documents, is that the cybersecurity requirements are nearly split around all of that documents and on different levels. They are often unaligned. They have not a clear differentiation what is meant really with enterprise and product cybersecurity, and they are partially separate documents which purely focusing on software, while for us, our company is for sure also delivering software on the one hand side purely, but typically it's a combination of a system of hardware and software or system at the end of the day. Yeah. And often those requirements are really not aligned and synchronized. And I would like to mention one example why this missing differentiation between enterprise and product cybersecurity makes such a challenge. One example is if you request regular penetration testing or annual penetration testing of the systems. It's important to know if you are talking about enterprise IT and demanding that you are regularly scan your enterprise IT environment for potential threats and vulnerabilities and weaknesses, it's a different discussion if you demand this for electronic control unit to do it on an annually basis. And that is important that such kind of differentiation has been made, and often also enterprise IT security and product cybersecurity are separate teams in many of the organizations. Furthermore, what I have looked into and what I can bring to you here in that presentation, I looked also on all those contracts. I have more or less analyzed 80 cybersecurity related contractual documents from 30 OEMs, really worldwide, also including C OEMs, Japanese OEMs, European OEMs, gives you quite a broad overview. More or less, I looked into over 1,800 requirements. Those requirements have been tagged to clusters, and also one requirement can be multiple times listed in one cluster. So now coming to the analysis itself. What you have seen, I looked into the topic of requirements related to cybersecurity management and the organization behind it. And in those contracts, you see that nearly half of all those requirements are covering the aspects of rule, processes, and policies, culture, competence, and resource planning, as well as responsibility metrics. You see some portion in the area of information security, which is also fine because a cybersecurity management system for sure is covering also the aspects of manufacturing security, for instance. So there are parts which are related to information security, as well as the whole topic about TSAX compliance. Yeah. Then you have audit and reporting plannings. Somehow, how do you integrate your management system in the overall quality management system? About 8% of all of those contracts. Information sharing policy, communication plan, management system organization. So organizational structures are defined here. Remedial and retention plan, and tool management. This is a little bit that you see from the number of requirements in all these contracts, which takes more place, more or less. Yeah, where typically the focus is on. Now looking what kind of external standards and regulations are requested. More than 55% in all these contracts is mentioning ISO SAE 21434. That's perfect because it's the most common standard. We see only a small portion referring to ISO PAS 5112. I think that seems to be not so much well established, maybe for two reasons, because many of the customers are actually performing audits by themselves as well. So what I see from the reality is that the cybersecurity certificate is nice. It's okay. Yeah, it maybe limits a little bit the time spending on an individual audit, but it does not replace individual audits. Yeah, this is still what we perceive from our customer. And the maturity, or many of those contracts are still referring to UN ECE R.155 and 156, which is a little bit surprising because as a supplier, when you are not directly involved in the type approval, you also cannot fulfill compliance to those regulations. You can support the car manufacturer to achieve that compliance, but by default, you cannot be achieve that compliance by your own to that regulation. Why is the whole contractual situation so complex? As I said, we have here the vehicle manufacturer. You have a tier one as a system supplier or component supplier, and then you have multiple tier twos. Maybe to say it, a high performance computer partially contains deliverables, software deliverables from over 100 suppliers. So you need to more or less, a tier one need to manage more than 100 suppliers. And now, how does it look like? The vehicle manufacturer is pushing down a contract, an agreement, more or less, with the system supplier. But it's also saying you need to manage somehow your supply chain. the system supplier have partially long-term contracts with the component supplier. And then the requirements coming down from the vehicle manufacturer and expected to be passed down to the component supplier as well. Those negotiations typically takes between 2 and 3 years. They are long-term negotiation on general terms, on general quality aspects. Those are not kind of, project specific. And this we need to understand. So also, I believe when a vehicle manufacturer is passing down a new document which describes general quality assurance requirements for cybersecurity, for instance, it takes many years until each of their tier one is agreed and accepted those documents. But the same is multiplied by the system supplier, discussing it with hundreds of different component suppliers. And the challenge is more or less the component suppliers is returning then a deliverable, which is software or hardware component, while the vehicle manufacturer partially also delivers own software. We are at the moment in a situation where we are doing co-developments of products. Sometimes the vehicle manufacturer is also demanding to use dedicated component suppliers where they have agreements on, which the system supplier needs to integrate, but has no insight what has been actually agreed. Partially, we do not know if we have the permission to perform, for instance, penetration testing on that aspect of the components which we get delivered, either from the vehicle manufacturer or from the component supplier. So how can we then ensure the overall security of the system? And I would like to make it more concrete on the example of penetration testing. I think you are all aware of maybe it's a hacker paragraph in Germany or the situation on penetration test allowance, what we have. And yes, it's okay. The vehicle manufacturer has testing obligations also to fulfill the UN ECE regulation. And this testing obligations, they need to pass down to the system supplier and to the component supplier. We have then the vehicle manufacturer requesting to get the permission and the agreements for penetration testing. The component suppliers are responding to it, but partially with restriction. And the question is, what if is one component supplier is not accepting the conditions for penetration testing? What shall we then do? Can we actually perform then a system test, penetration test on the product? And how can we pass over those restrictions also to the vehicle manufacturer? Because quite often the vehicle manufacturer is not doing the penetration test by themselves. They have also third-party companies doing it. And I want to make it really clear. When the vehicle manufacturer it's okay typically if they ask for permission for penetration testing. What we quite often see in the contracts, that they are also asking or specifying in detail what they want to do with the penetration testing, such as I would like to do decompilation, I would like to do reverse engineering, I would like to do code injection, and so on and so forth. Those adds additional hurdle that the complete supply chain is accepting those requirements. Because those component suppliers at the end of the day have own license agreements again with other big large suppliers, which maybe prohibits to do reverse engineering. So we need to be careful how we really describe it. Yeah. And we need to simplify it. We are running in problems if one party involved is trying to get a 100% legal protection, more or less, and asking everything as a blanco check, more or less, that this will not be accepted along the supply chain. And this is at the moment a huge burden which we have. And to be honest, that's just purely administrative effort. It does not add anything on the security side. Yeah, it's administrative effort to get those permission along a huge and horizontal large supply chain. At the end of the day, when we come also to the topic of security testing and penetration testing, yes, all of us need to act legal compliance. Yes, we need to ensure the approval on the one hand side, but also need to understand, to limit releases, to not extend it and get 100% legal protection for one party involved. The penetration test needs to be performed in a reasonable way and with integrity. Needs to be done by qualified persons. We need to ensure confidentiality and privacy. What we have heard along the supply chain, they are worried that maybe your third-party supplier, which you are using for penetration tests, might release information about weaknesses or vulnerabilities without prior involvement of the supplier. Also, plan timely communication and reporting so that it's been done really and aligned along the whole supply chain. I think that are major items which helps to get acceptance on the topic of penetration testing. Now I have some wishes towards, for sure, on the one hand side, the vehicle manufacturers, but also to the whole industry, how to design that kind of contracts to make our life a little bit easier and not being so much frustrated with all the laws and contractual obligation. First of all, reduce duplicates and conflicting requirements. As you have seen, there's a hierarchy of documents involved, and they are quite sometimes really duplicating requirements. For me as a supplier, when I decline in one document a requirement, I cannot be sure that it's been overruled by another document with the same requirement. Be clear, and that is the second part. Yeah, we need to be clear which document overrules each other. That's also quite critical to understand, and not for all documents the cybersecurity experts are actually involved in the analysis of it. Differentiate more between enterprise, IT security, and product cybersecurity. As I said, one example was on that frequent penetration testing requirement, and because the topics are quite often split around different departments. We need to we should only differ from international standards and regulation only if it's necessary. Otherwise, it's getting additional efforts and burden, which increases at the end of the day the cost of a product, which we need to be clear here. Legal risk needs to be balanced. One example was on that penetration testing. So it cannot be that one party in the whole supply chain wants to have 100% legal protection for everything as a kind of blanco check, and everyone needs to accept that. That will not work, not with this huge supply chain. We need to find a way how to balance it between all of us, between the whole supply chain, in order to make real progress in the cybersecurity. And one important part is avoid that those documents and requirements needs to pass down through the entire supply chain. What I mean with that, in many of the contracts, it's written, these are our 400 requirements, general requirements, more or less. Please pass it down one by one to your suppliers. Okay, then there's a tier 2. The tier 2 is getting those documents from 30 different OEMs and is asking, what the heck? What should I do? How much do I need to increase the price in order to fulfill and satisfy all those documents? And when you differ from international standards and regulation, it's getting actually, it's additional efforts. It's mostly additional burden on them. And how can we make sure that this then gets accepted? And they might need then to pass it down to their suppliers again and again as well, which are partially not from the automotive industry. At some level, the suppliers do not know ISO SAE 21434, for instance, yeah, and do not know maybe some specific other standards in the automotive industry. So we need to understand, is this really the right way to transfer the risk? Do we need it to pass it down to the lowest supplier in the whole chain? Does it really make sense? So here we need to be a little bit more cautious on that. Now, what is the solution? I can tell you how we tackle the situation. You have on the one hand side the contracts, you have state-of-the-art standards and legal technical regulations. You need to put this all in one bucket. You need to have someone able to analyze all those documents. On top of that, there comes a self-commitment. Then you split it into product-related and process-related requirements. You are performing a gap analysis towards your process landscape or product technical feasibilities. Then you are working out your implementation system, and at the end of the day, achieving hopefully a compliance solution. So it's a part of external and internal requirement screening, it's analysis and evaluation, and then the regulatory fulfillment. When you have it in too many different departments, so one department does not know what is actually demanded by the technical regulations, legal technical regulations. The other department knows what is written in contracts but cannot match it. So there's a benefit, to take here one department with a holistic view on all those topics. Now it comes to my conclusion already. The main takeaways. In order to achieve harmonized regulation and standards, it is a joint effort. I think we did all together as an industry also a good job when it comes to the China regulation and to the regulation in India. And yes, there are associations in the automotive industry involved to ensure that this works out like it is at the moment. But it's a joint effort for the whole industry, not for single parties in that industry. We all need to work together because different requirements in different markets does not add value. It just means we cannot reuse existing platforms and solutions. And I do not believe that it brings forward the cybersecurity overall. We need to simplify the contractual complexity to reduce deviation from standards and regulations. So it's fine if you ask for ISO SAE 21434 compliant. Be more cautious what you ask on top of that and if it really adds the value and if it needs to be passed down along the whole supply chain. Balance legal risk and only focus on those points which really matters, and align external and internal demands to achieve a compliant management system. So as I said, it makes sense to take a holistic view on contracts, on state of the art, on legal technical regulation and standards. Because what we all want to be, we want to be back in the situation that we are all again the superhero, protecting passengers and vehicles for cybersecurity attacks and really do the things which matters. So with that, thank you very much. There will not be a Q&A session, what I've heard, unfortunately, but I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Thanks, Matthias. And as you already said, there's an invitation to all our participants to join you in the lounge to mingle and chat and ask their question directly to you. Thanks, Matthias. Bye-bye.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye-bye.